Today, we've lost another friend. I've had a few hours to process this. I will also share that I'm recording this on April Fool's Day, April 1 of 2024, but what I'm about to tell you is not a joke. So before I continue, because my brain is all over the place, why? Why am I doing this? I'm doing it because I think this is kind of my way to deal with things. September 20th, 2020, my father died. When I got the phone with my mother, I cried a little bit on the stairs. And I just told myself, I got to record. And so I just kept recording because that's just what I do. To keep my brain busy, I took a toast, one of my father's favorite drinks, Seagram 7, terrible. But that's what I did. So today I get a text message from a good friend of mine, a dear friend of mine. And it doesn't really say anything other than it's a screenshot, and another well-respected person of the NSX community had posted, "Guys, is Chris cut okay? Is someone playing a joke, April Fools or not? My post got deleted on NSX Prime. What's going on?" And it had more to it, and there was more responses, and I just immediately turned the text off and went to call him. This is Chris Cut, NSXTRA. Chris and I have had a pretty good relationship. Probably not as great as some, but definitely better than others. To the point where we've shared some things. When my father passed, Chris sent me a story. It's a very famous story about the egg. You can look it up. It's probably got 50 million views. It's about the cycle of life. And it helped me. It helped me get through the loss of my father. But, part of that was my father had been sick. It was sudden. It wasn't expected. But, he'd lived long enough to see his son, me, grow up and have a respectable job and turn my life around. And I've got kids. I've got grandkids. And we don't get forever in life. That's what my cousin had told me at the time. And that also was very impactful to the recovery. But this video that Chris Cut sent me, he said that he had watched it when he lost his father unexpectedly. And so he and I, we were already friends at that point. We'd gotten into quite a few back and forths online about differences in opinions, but we respected the hell out of each other. And I always considered him a friend, and I know he considered me a friend as well. But we built a pretty good friendship from that. So then today, I'm going to be all over the place, so I apologize. I immediately called his phone, and I hadn't talked to him on the phone in probably a month. And I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. So I called his phone, and it rang, and then a woman picked up. I assumed, knowing that what his relationship status is, because of the conversations I've had with him over the past few months, 6-7 months or so, that it was his mother. And I thought, oh no. She said she's been getting phone calls all day. His phone's been ringing off the hook. She's been answering it. I didn't ask her immediately the direct question that everybody at this point wanted to know, but instead I asked her, what's going on? Is there anything I can do to help? Just calling for Chris. And eventually she said that he had passed. She got a call from the sheriff. The police gave her his phone. He's in a single car accident a couple miles away from his house on his way home. They had plans to see each other. He was going to come over. So definitely unexpected. So I talked to her for about an hour on the phone. And I went into serving mode. I wanted to make sure that she had anything she needed. Is there anything I could do? She asked me where I was, told her I was in Phoenix. They're in Connecticut. But it sounded as if she was obviously incredibly overwhelmed with the phone going off. She's not used to technology. Her son, Chris, just bought this fancy Apple phone and she has no idea how to work it. So I had offered to reach out to a few people and post officially online. And I wasn't the first one to have spoken to her. But just to kind of alleviate all the phone calls, because it's April Fool's Day, people want to know. He knew a lot of people. People wanted to know. Is it just a sick joke? And I think what I'll say about that before I get back to the rest of the story is Chris, he had his detractors online. He and another friend of mine, Brian, I won't call him out by his last name, but Brian is a really good guy too, and they're professional trolls sometimes. But behind being an online troll, they're both two of the greatest people I've ever met. And so, were they trolling? Was this a joke? But when I posted that I had confirmed it, and there were still people asking if it was a joke, it just made me so upset. I was angry. But at the same time, I understand because of the day. And there's a lot of people who did not like him, Chris Cutt, because they didn't really know him. They were used to going back and forth with him, arguing over insignificant things like cars. One of our mutual friends said of him, he hated the NC1 NSX. And I go, no, he did not hate the car at all. He hated how much the MSRP was, but had the car been cheaper, he would have bought it. He told me this. I believe him. So I think he was misunderstood, but he had a shell and you had to get through it. And once you got through it, there's nothing he wouldn't have done for anyone. I'm going to miss Chris. Famously, he's the guy with the NSX and a half. So you may have seen on social media, if you don't know who he is, in watching this, he had the red NSX and then he had an NSX trailer. We always joked, he and I, that his peak was when the famous comedian Jeff Foxworthy made fun of him and said, you're a redneck when you have this. But he loved it. But he also loved his dog Cassius. And so for many of us that knew him well enough to know that Cassius was his life, Cassius was aging. When my dog Izzy died, Chris was one of the first people to call me and talk to me because he knew how much I love my dog. And if you're not a dog person or pet person, you're not going to understand. But the longer you have these dogs, they're like your children. And Cassius was, I want to say, 17-year-old shepherd, maybe 18. And that is, maybe even older, but that is insane for that dog. So I was genuinely concerned, just as many people, what's Chris going to do when he loses Cassius? March 22nd, I'm working outside and Chris sends me a text message. Cassius is gone. And I knew immediately what that meant. I texted him, asked him if I can call, if he preferred text message, if he just wanted some time. I didn't really expect a text message back, and I didn't get one for a couple days. But then he responded, because I told him, man, you were there for me when I lost my father and my dog. I'm there for you too. So after a couple days, we sent some text messages back and forth, which is great. And I recently uploaded a mental health thing, and I've always been really big on check on your friends. And so that's where my mind was with Chris. And I had him on my calendar to call this week. Again, today is Monday, April 1st. I think I'll call him Tuesday or Wednesday. I wanted to give him a week. Never got the chance. Last year, for NS Expo, I was able to convince Chris into donating a little miniature of his car and trailer and Cassius so that we can raffle it off for charity at NS Expo. And he said, I'll do it, but it has to go to charity. It has to go to ASPCA because he's worried about his dog. He wanted to get more involved with doing charity work. So, Jay, how do you do it? You do the charity stuff all the time. I want to do something. I want to make a difference. I'm tired of just being NSXTRA on YouTube. And I go, yeah, Chris, you don't want to be defined by your car. If you can be defined by who you are, because people either know him for his car or the people who really know him for the incredible person he is and how much he loved Cassius, his dog. And that was our last car conversation. We've had a few really deep and long life situation phone calls. And I was looking forward to the next one. So when I called his phone and his mom answered, weirdly, she recognized my name. And so I think she's only answering those calls from those people. And I think there's a dozen of us or so that she knew about. And had she not answered that phone, like everyone else, I'd be speculating. With the exception of Brian, who had posted, the guy I talked about earlier without saying his last name. And I don't know. You just have to take people it's such a hard day. It's April Fool's. You'd have to be an immature teenager or someone really sick to joke about this. But it's not a joke. It took me a while to process this, and I'm fine. I'll be okay. Because even in talking to Chris, I know that life is weird, man. Life just happens. And we don't know the full details. I know he was in his S2000. He had the top off. And I know that because his mother said he had taken the top off to go for a cruise. He went out for a nice steak dinner and never made it home. But what a tough week and a half. Lost Cassius, his dog, grieving, and now he's gone. And we just recently lost another NSX family icon, Jim Cozzolino. But like Cozzolino, Chris was very polarizing. People either loved him or they misunderstood who he was. And I'm going to miss that guy. He gave me a lot of podcast exclusives because we legit had fun. And I'm going to dig some of those up and I'm going to put out a special episode. And guys, it's not to make money. Everybody can listen to my podcast. It's not going to make me a dime. Because I don't have it set up that way. But people deserve to know who these owners, who these car drivers are behind the wheel. Because everyone behind the wheel is still a real person with real life and real issues. And like I said, Chris wasn't perfect, but none of us are. But he helped me out a lot when I really needed someone to help me out. Kind of at a loss for words. There's so much more I could say. And the thing is, Chris wasn't my best friend. I've never met him in person. We've FaceTimed quite a bit. He's been on our Instagram show with my friend Wes, and Wes knows him really well and was concerned about him and Cassius. And we've been talking about when's Chris going to come back? When is he going to come back on the show? But as far as people that you haven't met in person, he was up there. And every time I talked to him, when are you going to do your cross-country drive? Because he was supposed to do a cross-country drive 2 years ago. And between car issues and Cassius getting old, he just couldn't put it together. But yeah, as far as people go that I've never met in person, that I've only known really well online on the phone, he was up there. And this one really sucks. And there's people who are even closer to him. And my heart goes out to anyone and everyone who's ever met him that knows him for the person he is. For the good person he is. He was. Rest in peace, Chris Cutt at NSXTRA.
So, I mean, who knows what would have happened, except I know that if I didn't do that, I'd now have enough Bitcoin to buy all of the NSXs.
Yeah, because the American dollar value towards Bitcoin. Yeah, that's dumb. Yeah, that's dumb.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, that's dumb.
And
that looks like a
they'll do
dog
it-
dragging his ass across the floor.
Exactly. And they'll do it to the point where like their back bumper is dragging and they can't see over the hood.
Him, Adam, and Gilbert Godfrey are all kind of on the same talking cadence in voice
Gilbert
pitch.
Godfrey is absolutely hilarious too.
Yeah, it's
you can get him to say there's a I think it's called Cameo.
Oh yeah, the Cameo thing where you can.
Honestly, if people want to know what's going on with me, they're better off listening to your podcast, because I think I've always announced things on your thing first before I've actually ever seen it on YouTube. So